I'd like to turn now to our next speaker, Dr. Gerry Wright. Dr. Wright is the director of the Michael de Groot Institute for Infectious Disease Research at McMaster University. He is a professor in the Department of Biochemistry and Biomedical Sciences and an associate member in the Departments of Chemistry and Chemical Biology and of Pathology and Molecular Medicine. His laboratory studies the molecular mechanism of bacterial antibiotic resistance using chemical biology and chemical genetic approaches, as well as the identification of new antibiotics and new antimicrobial strategies. Dr. Wright?
Thank you so much, Stefan and Shayna, for the invitation to speak to you today and to be part of this really impressive panel, and to tell you a little bit about some of the stuff that we're working on at McMaster University to try and address this challenge that we're facing as well, but leveraging on a number of decades of experience in the area of infectious disease, as I'll tell you. So we're going to hear a lot about pandemics, I'm sure, today and COVID, but it does really bring home the impact of what happens if you do not have an effective therapy for an infectious disease. I think in many, for over many years now, we've tended to think that infectious diseases are things that are something of the past. We forget that before COVID, the biggest killer on the planet was still tuberculosis. 1.4 million people died in 2019 of TB. So what happens when you don't have a good therapy? Well, your medical facilities, your caregivers become overwhelmed, your public health sector is completely underwater. There's massive societal impacts, economic impacts, as well, as we've heard in Peter's talk. Importantly, there are really grave inequities across communities. These infectious diseases do not affect everyone in the same way, and the most vulnerable are the most victimized. All this stuff happens pretty fast, especially in an era of social media that often generates an information vacuum that results in an erosion of trust with our leaders and gives opportunities for things like conspiracy theories to emerge. So this is not just a biomedical and clinical problem. It's a societal problem that requires a really multidisciplinary strategy to be able to tackle. And there's lots of opportunities in there as well. Now, whether this is COVID or whether it's the first SARS pandemic or epidemic, whether it's HIV/AIDS, the same themes emerge over and over and over again. And those of us in the field of infectious disease recognize this. I thought this was a good quote over the weekend in Wall Street Journal. Tom Frieden used to be the director of the CDC under the Obama administration, where he says, "We must act now. 2021 is the now or never moment to improve global resilience in facing future pandemics. We can't know the character or the timing of the threats ahead, but they are inevitable. And there's no time to lose in making preparations." And hopefully our policymakers and decision makers are paying attention at this stage. And that includes our leaders in industry. So COVID-19 certainly exposed our weaknesses across many sectors. It really identified places we should have invested and where we have to invest in the future, as Shayna pointed out. So that includes fundamental and applied research. It really includes as well, not just that, but there has to be a way to move these findings to receptors in a more facile fashion. Biomanufacturing is a massive gap, and we're gonna hear more about that, I'm sure. But as well, the other thing that was missing is actually networking. How do we, because these problems affect so many people across society, how do we establish going forward an opportunity so that engineers know clinicians, so that social scientists know ethicists, and all of these people get used to speaking with each other so that they can work together to address these big problems. Because we're always going to face these threats, but I really think that there's a tremendous opportunity here for innovation, as we just heard from Peter's amazing story, and the impact that that's going to have is really tremendous. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity for Canada to be a leader in this area and not to be a follower. Just some history on why we got involved in this. We've been investing strategically in infectious disease research at McMaster for about 20 years. This, led to the generous donation from Mike DeGroot to create the Institute for Infectious Disease Research in 2007, followed by several other philanthropic donations, including from Mr. David Braley, who created the Center for Antibiotic Discovery a couple of years ago. So philanthropists have really driven this area, at least in our university, because it's challenging to get people excited about working in infectious disease and investing in them. And as we can, as opposed to chronic diseases, which are seen to be more profitable. Nevertheless, we were able to build out some pretty extensive enabling infrastructure in drug discovery and biosafety labs and vaccine manufacturing, as you'll hear. Lots of research investment from the public and private sector and philanthropists, as I mentioned. And we've been able to, as Shana pointed out, how important this is, train over 1,000 people. And these are all in the labs of 35 researchers across 10 departments, 4 faculties. It really has to be multidisciplinary if you're gonna tackle these complex problems, and then building that network, building that community of researchers who are used to seeing each other, mathematical modelers and clinicians, for example, having coffee together is really important to get these things moving. Just a couple of words about some of the infrastructure. We have a pretty state-of-the-art preclinical drug discovery platform, high throughput screening and medicinal chemistry, really supported by extensive chemical libraries, as well as proprietary ones that we have, platforms to explore pharmacology of candidate drugs, and then obviously animal models of infection and a number of different species. We do have GMP vector-based vaccine manufacturing capacity that's suitable for the production of tens of thousands of vaccines. So great for phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials, for example, or for small outbreaks, and a strong group in point of care diagnostics, in particular, using DNA aptamer platforms and paper-based technologies. So this has resulted over the years in a number of opportunities. So in intellectual property, so lots of patent applications, a number of spin-off companies. A recent really big success is Adapsin Biosciences. It's just had an influx of about $160 million from Pfizer and various other ones. And of course, dozens of pharma agreements with small, medium-sized biotech, as well as the big players in the field. So that background enabled us to pivot very quickly to COVID-19 research back in February of last year, now just a year ago, and really trying to span that gap, as I mentioned to you before, the from clinical to biomedical engineering, economics, and social sciences. We really wanted to span the whole region because this is having an impact across all of these sectors. And we opened up our labs to help as best as we could get our local biomanufacturing and biotechnology companies access to some of the latest pathogens that we were working with. So that's started what we're calling the Global Nexus Initiative for Pandemics and Biological Threats. It's about 60 faculty across 6 faculties at the university. It brings a whole spectrum of expertise, as I mentioned to you before, from engineers to chemists to social sciences, and so we can deal with smaller outbreaks up to pandemics, and of course, I don't think we should forget the biosecurity elements of this going forward. Our objective is, and our reality is that we're trying to partner and engage with colleagues across the sectors, obviously in other academic institutions, we're quite used to that, but also government and public health. But we've been working a lot with Public Health Agency of Canada, for example, not-for-profits like the Gates Foundation, and of course, industry. And this is a special topic for today. Our objective here is to do our best to serve these vulnerable communities and to generate knowledge and evidence that has impact, that can be translated into real outcomes, and not just write papers as we're used to as academics. So we're really looking at this in a sort of holistic way, that we're trying to bring this interdisciplinary groups together to be able to prepare, predict, respond, and recover. Really, again, emphasizing translation and trying to connect this to real-time solutions. So some ongoing projects that I'll mention to you that have been established since the development of the global Nexus idea in the spring of 2020. So here's an example of work in long-term healthcare facilities. This is based on a long-standing partnership with some really important players in this area in our region and across Canada. And the goal here is to bring this group of investigators across all these disciplines, as I mentioned, led by Andrew Costa and Don Bowdish, to look at this challenge in two ways. There's the individual challenge of in these facilities of immune risk, and also the risk to the facility itself, right? Staff, elements of staff, number of people in a room, how big is it, how well is it funded? This is a lot of social sciences research, and this, of course, is supplemented by a lot of individual immune-based research as well. The objective of this project is to really establish risk. Who are the most at-risk individuals in these kinds of situations? Are there markers of immunity that we can actually use to be able to identify who's more at risk than others? And of course, on the facility side, what are the patterns? What are the things we're doing right? What are the things we're doing wrong? And use all of this together to be able to change practice going forward. In a joint venture between engineering and some engineers and some clinicians in our Faculty of Health Sciences, we realized very quickly, as we all knew, that there was this shortage in PPE, and in fact, in innovation in PPE here in Canada. We relied on supplies outside the country for too long. So the Ontario government, with this team, funded a Center of Excellence in Protective Equipment and Materials with some colleagues at the University of Toronto, whose objective are to develop new materials and strategies to be able to develop platforms to do testing of PPE. That includes things like filtration efficiency and fit testing. And this has attracted just a number of industrial partners, ranging from folks who are making new surfaces to textile companies who want to be able to weave into their products protection mechanisms that can actually be used to address the current pandemic and future problems. I think for sure what we're going to see going forward is a lot more mask use like we see in Asia than there in our part of the world and going forward in the future, for example. Another example of harnessing sort of existing facilities and existing capacity, we developed a series of rapid testing platforms. One study that was initiated by my colleagues Eric Brown and Don Bowdish is, we call it the SPIT study. And this has really been absolutely game-changing for us to run our academic laboratories going forward in a safe fashion. Provides tremendous peace of mind. And so this is asymptomatic screening. So people who are enrolled in the study, so that's students, faculty, staff, provide a saliva sample 2 or 3 times a week. This is screened that very same day to be able to provide a go, no go decision on whether there is detectable amount of virus in saliva. The retirement facilities that we've been working with got news of this, and they really wanted to get on board with this and this idea as well, testing their staff. And it's been incredibly successful and been an opportunity to really avoid outbreaks by catching people who are shedding virus but are asymptomatic of disease. Taking advantage of some of the high throughput technology we're used to at MAC, a group started McMaster Health Lab, so Merrick Smeja and David Brewer, to be able to do nasopharyngeal swab testing in an automated fashion on a really big scale. And this they partnered with Air Canada and Toronto Pearson, and you probably have seen that in the news where folks can get off an airplane and then provide a sample and be tested and have their information delivered to them while they're waiting in quarantine in their hotel room. The other area where we pivoted very quickly is in the areas of vaccines and therapeutics. I mentioned that we have this GMP manufacturing capacity, and in particular in vector-based vaccines. A lot of the technology for using adenoviral vector-based vaccines and gene therapies was based on work that was done at McMaster in the 1980s by Frank Graham. And the team here has a multivalent vaccine candidate, so spike plus other proteins, 2 other proteins, to hopefully diminish the impact of variants of concern that is going into phase 1 clinical trials next month. This is a really interesting innovation too, because the delivery system is an initial injection, but the booster is through an inhaled puffer system. So that could be a game changer, I think, going forward in vaccine delivery. On the drug discovery side, we've taken full advantage of our platforms to be able to run a lot of high throughput screens on viral and host targets for intramural programs, but as well as partnership with academic and private sector labs across the country. In our intramural project, we've been focusing a lot on our proprietary collection of natural products, and then going through and validating these in our containment level 3 facility in viral growth assays, and now increasingly in murine animal models of SARS-CoV-2 infection. So this is just an example of some of the companies that we've partnered with over the last few months to be able to perform studies with them and for them. Again, it just shows the breadth of opportunity by investing in these platforms over the years through federal and provincial government programs. We've created this opportunity to be able to pivot very, very quickly and provide really important access to expertise and to technology for companies that otherwise by themselves could not do this on their own. So that's just some examples on the clinical and biomedical side. I did want to make the point too that research goes beyond that, and one of the important areas that McMaster is well known for is evidence-based medicine and evidence synthesis, and making sure that policymakers and decision makers get the best evidence is absolutely vital, and this is something that we're pushing very hard on. So my colleague John Lavis at the McMaster Health Forum, together with his colleagues at the Ottawa Hospital, have developed COVID-End. And COVID-End is an evidence network to be able to provide the best evidence to customers, to policymakers, to industry in an era of very high noise to signal ratio. So a lot of what's out there is out of date very quickly. A lot of it is poor quality, and this is third-party, really rigorous, established evidence synthesis strategies. And so COVID-End blasts out on a regular basis Canadian evidence in areas like vaccine rollout, long-term healthcare crisis, and as well on the global side, at least twice a month as well. And then on a regular basis, expands that to larger issues that are emerging and providing, again, evidence based on what is well-designed studies out there, so that we can move very, very quickly on what's the best strategy forward. So a lot of what I'm talking to you about is happening in a virtual setting. We're very keen to take full advantage of co-localization to make this a reality, and so we're developing a property at our innovation park, which is just about a kilometer or so down the road from McMaster campus proper, by moving the Global Nexus initiative off into this area where we're going to be right beside a number of enabling facilities like like startup programs, and we're in a good situation to be able to do more, and that's part of what we want to do. And then finally, I just want to say that the Canada is just too big and too diverse to suggest that one individual group or one individual place can actually take care of all of this. And so I've been calling this the Dunkirk model in homage to the evacuation of the British Army in the Second World War from France back to England. It's a series of small boats that made that happen. It wasn't one gigantic ocean liner that brought the entire army back. And I think there's an analogy there for us to follow, that there has to be recognition that a series of investments across the country in a number of different areas is necessary to make sure that we take full advantage of all the expertise that across all the sectors that exist already, and we can continue to grow them to make sure that we're safe for the next pandemics and biological challenges. So I'll stop there, and again, just thank the team for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Wright.